somewhere on the year 170, on the frozen banks of the Danube River, the most powerful man in the world sat alone in a military tent and began writing a letter to himself, not to his generals, not to the Senate in Rome, not to the historians he knew would document his every word. To himself, private notes, reminders, confessions, self-corrections written in the middle of a war in a language Greek that was not even his native tongue, as if the distance of a foreign language gave him permission to be more honest. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." These notes were never given a title. They were never organized for publication. They were never shown to another living person. They were the private confessions of a man who, by every external measure, had already won everything, and who spent every morning of his life reminding himself not to be destroyed by it. We know them today as the Meditations, and they are the most important document ever written by a person in power. Let us enter the archive. Marcus Aurelius was born in Rome in the year 121. His family was wealthy, connected, and politically influential, but he was not born to be emperor. He was born to be a philosopher. From the age of 12, he wore rough philosopher's cloaks instead of fine Roman robes. He slept on a hard mat on the floor. He studied Greek philosophy, rhetoric, and stoicism with a devotion his tutors described as alarming. Then, when he was 17 years old, the Emperor Hadrian noticed him, and everything changed. Hadrian, who had no biological heir, engineered a complex chain of adoptions that would eventually place Marcus on the throne. Marcus did not ask for this. There is strong historical evidence that he actively mourned it. He had wanted a life of contemplation and study. He was given an empire of 60 million people, endless military crises, plague, famine, and the full weight of the Roman world pressing down on a single set of shoulders. He reigned for 19 years, and in all 19 of those years, the historical record shows no act of tyranny, no execution of political rivals, no abuse of power for personal gain. In an era when Roman emperors regularly murdered senators, poised family members, and declared themselves gods, Marcus Aurelius spent his evenings writing notes reminding himself to be patient with difficult people. The philosopher Plato had written centuries earlier that the world would only know peace when philosophers became kings, or kings became philosophers. Marcus Aurelius was the only moment in history that this actually happened, and he hated it. To understand Marcus Aurelius, you must understand the philosophy he built his mind on. Stoicism was not, as the modern world has misunderstood it, the art of suppressing emotion. It was the art of making a precise distinction between what is inside your control and what is not, and then refusing to spend a single unit of energy on the latter. Marcus understood that he could not control the plague that killed 5 million Romans during his reign. He could not control the Germanic tribes flooding across the Danube. He could not control the betrayal of his most trusted general, Avidius Cassius, who launched a civil war while Marcus was fighting on the northern frontier. He could not control the deaths of 8 of his 13 children before they reached adulthood. What he could control was his response, his attention, his judgment, the quality of his character in each individual moment. He wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This was not passive resignation. This was surgical precision. By refusing to be emotionally hijacked by things outside his control, Marcus freed his entire mental bandwidth for the things that were inside his control: his decisions, his relationships, his work, his character. Every morning before he faced the court, the Senate, the generals, the petitioners, the endless machinery of empire, he sat alone and wrote. He reminded himself of what he was walking into. He named the difficult people he would encounter that day. He preloaded his mind with the patience and perspective he would need before the storm began. The meditations were not a record of his wisdom. They were the daily workout of a mind that refused to go soft. Here is what makes Marcus Aurelius unlike almost every other powerful person in history. He had absolute power, the kind of power that corrupts absolutely, the kind that turns men into tyrants within years of acquiring it, and it did not corrupt him, not because he was naturally saintly, but because he had built a philosophical system that actively inoculated him against the disease of power. He wrote obsessively about the seduction of flattery. He reminded himself constantly that the applause of the crowd was worthless. He wrote, "Receive without pride, relinquish without struggle." He noted that Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, 2 of the most celebrated conquerors in history, were dead, forgotten by the universe, their empires dissolved into dust. He used this not to feel despair, but to feel free. If none of it lasts, then none of it is worth compromising your character for. He refused to move into the imperial palace for years after becoming emperor, preferring to remain in the house where he had grown up. When he held war councils, he listened to the youngest officers first, so their opinions would not be contaminated by whatever the senior generals had already said. He freed thousands of slaves from imperial holdings. And yet he was not weak. When Avidius Cassius launched his rebellion, Marcus marched an army to confront him, and then, when Cassius was assassinated by his own troops before the armies met, Marcus ordered that all letters captured from Cassius's camp be burned unread, so that he would not know which senators had secretly supported the rebellion. He did not want to know who his enemies were. He did not trust himself to treat them fairly if he knew. That is not the action of a weak man. That is the action of a man who understood his own capacity for vengeance and chose architecture over impulse. Inside the archive, we must look at what this philosophy cost him. The Antonine Plague arrived in Rome around 165. It killed an estimated 5 million people across the empire over 15 years, entire villages emptied, legions decimated, the economic infrastructure of Rome shattered. Marcus personally directed the relief effort, selling imperial treasures to fund it, rather than raising taxes on a population already broken by disease. Meanwhile, on the northern frontier, Germanic tribes were testing the borders in ways they never had before. Marcus spent the last decade of his reign in almost continuous military campaign. He was not a natural soldier. He was a philosopher forced into armor. He wrote about the cold, the noise, the moral ugliness of war. He did not glamorize it. He endured it. He wrought in the tent on the Danube. Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. He lost 8 children. He buried them with the same stoic resolve he brought to everything else. But the meditations in this period become quieter, more personal, more raw. 8. A man doing the work of being a human being, while also doing the work of holding an empire together. He never complained publicly. The historical record contains no account of Marcus Aurelius expressing self-pity in front of another person. Everything went into the private journal. The confessions stayed between him and the page. He died in his military camp in the year 180. He was 58 years old. His last words, according to the historian Cassius Dio, were addressed to the guard outside his tent. He told the guard to go to sleep. He would not be needing him anymore, so how does a modern person apply the architecture of Marcus Aurelius? First, build your own meditations, not a gratitude journal, not a 5-year plan. A daily private reckoning, written before the day begins. What difficult situations are you walking into today? What version of yourself might you lose if you are not careful? Write it down. Preload the patience and the perspective before the storm arrives. Your journal is not a record of who you are. It is the daily construction of who you intend to be. Second, draw the line between what is yours and what is not. Every morning you will encounter problems, people, and circumstances that are not inside your control. Write a list. Put a line down the middle of the page. Left side, things I can influence. Right side, everything else. Then spend 0 energy on the right side. This is not passivity. This is the most radical act of focus available to a human being. Third, audit the flattery. The most dangerous thing power does, and power here means any success. Any status, any platform, any social approval is make you believe your own story. Marcus Aurelius combated this by deliberately reminding himself that everything passes, that the applause fades, that the emperors before him were already forgotten. Find your version of this. When you catch yourself being seduced by your own reputation, remember that you are made of the same material as everything that has already crumbled. Fourth, choose architecture over impulse. Marcus did not trust himself with the names of his enemies because he knew what he would do with that information. He built structures around his worst impulses rather than pretending those impulses did not exist. Know your weak points. Design systems that make acting on them harder. This is not self-denial. This is self-knowledge translated into engineering, closing in the entire historical record of human civilization. There has never been another person who held as much power as Marcus Aurelius and used as little of it for personal gain. He did not achieve this through natural saintliness. He achieved it through 19 years of daily, private, unglamorous philosophical work, notes written to himself in a foreign language, in a military tent, in the middle of a plague, in the cold. He had everything the world tells you to want. He wanted none of it. He wanted only to be a good man. and every morning he woke up and did the work to make that slightly more possible than it was the day before. The meditations were never meant to survive. That they did is the final act of a philosophy that proved its own argument, that what you build in private, with discipline and without an audience, is the only thing that truly lasts. Build it in private. Let it echo in public. Welcome to the archive.